Good morning, Tampa Bay. What is going on? Welcome, Channelside Sports in the morning, live on the Channelside Sports Network. Man, we've done it, guys. We've done it. I mean, I don't how excited can we possibly be? NFL Week 1 is basically in the books. I mean, let's let's be honest here. Who in the hell is really looking forward to tonight's game? It should be a massacre in favor of the Denver Broncos over the Seattle Seahawks tonight. But nonetheless, we still have one more game to go through. Of course, we are going to be running through all of the Week 1 action. I don't think we're going to be doing that for, the vast majority. Thank you for everybody that's tuning in exclusively on YouTube this morning. I want to hear from you guys as well. I want to hear what were your thoughts, what were your takeaways from Week 1, and I just want to know, what did we learn? What did we learn exactly from Week 1? And a lot of what I learned was, we lost T.J. Watt to a torn pectoral. Najee Harris left early, although he's not expected to have a serious injury. Of course, we know Dak Prescott fractured his thumb right as we were getting ready to go live this morning. Man, 6 to 8 weeks for Dak Prescott now with a fractured thumb, which leaves Cooper Rush. Dallas is already in trouble. Dallas was in trouble last night. We'll talk about that to close up the show and wrap it up. Loose Cannon Leprechaun, what is going on? Keenan Allen tweaked his hamstring. Eli Mitchell left with a knee injury. Mac Jones left with a back injury. T. Higgins got a concussion. Juwan James tore his Achilles. Of course, Chris Godwin tweaked his hamstring. We'll talk about that again a little later on. Nothing really to fear. Donovan Smith went down with an elbow injury. That, to me, that's a little more dangerous. We're gonna have to. This was an issue for me heading into the regular season, was the depth of the offensive line. And, here we go. One guy goes down, and we're going to have to start figuring some things out if we're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their offensive line. We'll start it with the NFC South. New Orleans traveled to Atlanta and almost lost this game, man. Atlanta held New Orleans pretty much in check for the majority of this game. And look, if I'm New Orleans and I beat Atlanta 27-26, and we're supposed to be challenging for the NFC South, I kind of have an issue with that if I'm the New Orleans Saints fan base, because the Atlanta Falcons are supposed to be rebuilding. I said it last week. I'm higher on the Atlanta Falcons than a lot of people are, because I think that the Falcons don't get enough credit. We haven't heard a lot about the Falcons in training camp, so I think that has a lot to do with it. It's been relatively quiet. It's been relatively quiet for the Atlanta Falcons on the news front. Marcus Mariota got the start. He had a nice little sneak in for a touchdown. Drake London wasn't supposed to play. Cordell Patterson picked up right where he left off from last season, kind of reinventing himself. And, imagine if Cordell Patterson was utilized this way early in his career. Arguably, if he played running back for the majority of his career, he might not still be in the NFL, just because the tread on the tires for a lot of running backs is kind of, it's not nearly as durable as a quarterback or wide receiver, or, basically any other position on the NFL field. But yeah, Cordell Patterson came in firing, looking hot, and it's, who would have thought that at the end of Week 1, we would see, I guess, Patrick Mahomes leading the way with 360 passing yards. Matt Ryan with 352 in a 20-20 tie over between the Colts and the Texans. Never would have saw that coming. Joe Burrow, number 3, 338 yards. you would assume that Joe Burrow would be somewhere in the mix. Carson Wentz, 313 yards, the fourth leading passer of the season. Definitely did not see that coming. And if you told me you saw that coming, you're a liar. As well as number 5 being Joe Flacco with 307 passing yards. Look, I was very adamant that now the Jets still looked terrible. The Jets still looked terrible on both sides of the ball. However, I was very, very vocal in saying, yeah, Joe Flacco's not going to be that guy. Joe Flacco's not going to be able to pass the ball around, move the ball around that easy. I honestly did not expect to see Joe Flacco wind up in the top 5, especially when they got beat 24-9. You know, that shows you there's a lot of stalling on those drives. A lot of settling for field goals. You got 3 field goals for the New York Jets. You got to punch the ball into the end zone. You're not going to win on field goals alone. You know, unless you're Tampa last night, who for the most part won on field goals alone, up until that Mike Evans touchdown. You know, it's week 1. It's always fun to have an overreaction Monday. I don't think that I'm overreacting, though, when I tell you better watch out for the Atlanta Falcons. You know, they lost. They had the game in hand. Sure. New Orleans is the better team. New Orleans is supposed to win this game. So if New Orleans loses, is it that bad? It's like if New Orleans beats the Falcons, that's the expected result heading into the game. New Orleans is favored by 5.5 heading into the game. So you have to look at it and go, okay, well, these were our lines heading into the game, but the Falcons only lost by a point, and they were leading for the majority of the game. The 49ers favored by 7.5 heading into the swampy Chicago Soldier Field. I don't know if you guys saw the beginning of that game, but every tackle resulted in a huge splash, and it was. To me, those games are fun. I know they're not necessarily that fun to play in when you've got like a muddy ground which you're stepping on. But man, like let's enjoy it. Let's 10. This is a shocker to me. 19. The Bears win 19-10 over the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are favored by 7.5. I don't think any of us expected. We didn't know what to expect out of the Chicago Bears. You know, and that was my biggest point heading into the season is last year you knew what to expect with the Chicago Bears. You knew that the Bears were going to be trash. You knew that the Chicago Bears were going to be terrible. But this year with the new GM, all new coaching staff, you didn't really know what to expect with them. Now, is this a sign of things to come? Is it a sign of things to come for the Chicago Bears? Maybe. But the 49ers, you have to remember, the San Francisco 49ers, and this was one of my big take-homes. Mike McDaniel was the offensive-minded genius with the San Francisco 49ers. Mike McDaniel designed the plays that Kyle Shanahan gets the credit for calling. He's not there anymore. Of course, Eli Mitchell went down with a knee injury, but what else is new? Let's be realistic here. Eli Mitchell missed a lot of time last year with injuries. The 49ers had a revolving door of health at the running back position. Trey Lance had a very untimely interception. Chicago Bears capitalized 19-10. Chicago Bears are now tied for first place in the NFC North. Pretty sure nobody saw that one coming. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati went down to the wire. Seemed like this was one of those games where nobody wanted to win, right? Like it goes down. It looked like it was going to end in a tie, in a 20-20 tie, which would have been ironic considering Indianapolis and Houston ended in a 20-20 tie. Evan McPherson had the opportunity. It was a 29-yard field goal, and he botched it. kicked it wide left, didn't make it. I mean, honestly, shit happens, right? But I think that for me, my biggest takeaway is that Joe Burrow was 33 of 53. That is, guys, that's not great. He had a 61.7 passer rating. We talk about Joe Burrow, is it a Super Bowl? I wouldn't say it's a Super Bowl hangover. I really wouldn't. Joe Mixon got on the boards for 82 yards rushing. Joe Burrow with his 4 interceptions, though, that to me is very untimely. And you saw that when T. Higgins went down, that Jamar Chase still had 10 receptions for $129. You have to respect Jamar Chase and the game and the chemistry that he and Joe Burrow have. I think that that's an interesting dynamic. We're going to see a hell of a lot more of pairing a wide receiver with a quarterback that were together in college. I really think that we're going to start seeing that more. Cincinnati's got to figure that out, though, if they're going to, I think that for me, I think this is a lesson for Joe Burrow. I think that's what it is Joe Burrow is, I don't want to say feeling himself too much, but he's kind of feeling himself too much, if you know what I mean. Like he's riding high, man. He was in his second year in the season. He was the leading passer in the entire NFL for anybody that was sacked more than 30 times. Of course, he was sacked, I think, 51 times last season. That's what you have to look at. He was sacked again 7 times yesterday. We thought that the Cincinnati Bengals shored up that offensive line. They stole Alex Kappa from us. We thought that the Bengals were going to be able to shore up that offensive line and protect Joe Burrow, and they didn't. He was under duress all game. Mitchell Trubisky was sacked 1 time. Mitchell Trubisky only passed for 194 yards. But he had a 78.2 passer rating, which was higher than Joe Burrow's. Chase Claypool ended up leading the team in rushing yards with 36 rushing yards on 6 carries. Of course, Najee Harris went down early. 10 carries for 23 yards for him. I think this is what you're going to get used to seeing, though, is Pat Freiermuth, 5 receptions, Deontay Johnson, 7 receptions. Chase Claypool had 4. George Pickens didn't really get involved. He only had 1 reception for 3 yards on 3 targets. But Deontay Johnson had 12 targets. Freiermuth had 10. Chase Claypool had 6. I think that's what you're going to see from Mitchell Trubisky is you're going to see this like game manager-esque flow from Mitchell Trubisky now. And it's not like you didn't see that before in Chicago, but people tend to remember the real bad parts, right? Like people really tend to remember like, oh, hey, Mitchell Trubisky looked really bad in Chicago, but we forget that everybody looked bad in Chicago because of Matt Nagy. Spend a year under Sean McDermott and Josh Allen, who is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. And I think you're going to be doing okay if you're Mitchell Trubisky, man. I really do. Eagles got it done in Detroit, 38-35. They almost lost that lead, though. Detroit got on the board early with a DeAndre Swift touchdown. I'm sorry, it was a Jamal Williams touchdown. It was the first touchdown of the game to get the Lions on the board. Jalen Hurts didn't look great. 18 of 32 for 243 yards. He really forced the issue to A.J. Brown. 10 receptions, 155 yards. Detroit was able to keep A.J. Brown out of the end zone, but the Eagles had 4 rushing touchdowns. Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, Jalen Hurts, and Miles Sanders all found pay dirt against that Detroit Lions defense, which was not really addressed in the offseason. And that was the question that a lot of people had was, how are we going to, how exactly are we going to stop if our offense is kind of lackluster, so to speak? How are we going to stop some of these prolific offenses, such as the Philadelphia Eagles? And, the bend but don't break defense only will take you so far, and eventually you have to start forcing turnovers, forcing the issues. And the Lions got no turnovers. They generated no turnovers. They only got to Jalen Hurts one time. However, Jared Goff only got sacked one time as well. And Jared Goff didn't look good, especially for the first half of the game. It was finished 21 of 37 for 215 yards. I think the big take home here is the rushing for both sides. If we're being realistic here, Miles Sanders was largely unused last year for the Philadelphia Eagles. I had 13 carries, which almost completely totaled his 2021 season carry total. Of course, I'm speaking tongue in cheek there. 13 carries for 96 yards and obviously a score. DeAndre Swift, I've gone on record saying DeAndre Swift is going to lead the NFC in rushing. 15 carries for $144 against the Philadelphia Eagles defense that's supposed to be very, very good. That's a promising note if you're looking at DeAndre Swift, especially if you watched Hard Knocks. Right? If you watched Hard Knocks, you saw a lot of DeAndre Swift like kind of getting chewed out by Deuce Staley, going, "Hey, hit the hole. Stop going around." We have to figure this out. Like, you need to understand, like, you're a running back. You can't just continue to cut around the edge. You can't continue to do like you can't continue to try to be elusive and evade tackles. You have to hit the hole. DeAndre Swift hits the hole, winds up with a $144, in a very, very positive game for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a few drops, finished with 8 receptions on 12 targets for 64 yards and a score. Thought it was pretty cool that Equanimeous St. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown both scored a touchdown within 3 minutes of each other. That's kind of cool, especially if you're John Brown, the parent, both parents really. But John Brown is the guy that is always wearing the split jersey between both of his kids, which is like I said, to me that's a pretty cool thing to see. How about the Miami Dolphins, guys? I said that the Dolphins are a team to watch out for. You got to look out for the Dolphins. We looked out for the Dolphins 20-7. Tua had 270 yards, a 104.4 passer rating. A 104.4 passer rating for Tua Tagovailoa. A very good game. Tua is in. Where did Tua is in the top 8 right now in terms of passer ratings. And also for a guy who, can't really throw with a 42-yard long pass, not too shabby. 69.7 yard completion percentage, 23 of 33. Tua looked good yesterday. A lot of people were low on Tua, and I had to be very adamant and say, from my perspective, I'm looking at it going, is it really Tua or is it Brian Flores trying to say, yeah, I'm going to call plays and I'm not going to make Tua look that great because I want Deshaun Watson. Tua's not my guy. Tua's a Stephen Ross guy. 20-7. He was hitting Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had 8 receptions for 94 yards. Jalen Waddle was a little quiet, 4 for 69, but he was 4 for 69 on 5 targets. Miami still struggled to run the ball. That's another thing that you have to look out for. Is Miami struggled to run the ball last year. They struggled to run the ball again this year. They totaled 65 yards on 23 carries. It's an average of 2.8 yards per carry. That's not good. That's not where you want to be. Like, you don't want to be there. You need to be the league average needs to be about 5 yards. If you're floating around the league average, say you're 4.3, 4.2, that's close enough and you'll be able to make do with it. But when you're sitting at below 3, You've got to figure that out, and you got to do something. You have to address that offensive line. Don't call the Buccaneers. We don't have anybody to trade you. Everybody's dropping like flies over here in Tampa. Baltimore got it done 24-9. I kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking about Joe Flacco. If you're going to expect Joe Flacco to have 59 passing attempts per game, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. If you're expecting Joe Flacco to have 59 passing attempts per game at the ripe age of 116. That's I mean, that's just being realistic here. You know, Lamar was 17 of 30, not a great passing game for him either. 213 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, which is good. But once again, you know, they're missing J.K. Dobbins, they're missing Gus Edwards. Kenyon Drake got in the mix. He led the team with 11 carries for 31 yards. Not the greatest. Baltimore's a rushing team. They're lucky they started the season off against the New York Jets, who are still trying to find their identity. Because if you can't rush the ball, if you're a run-first offense and you're putting up 63 points, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. Rashad Bateman, 2 receptions, 59 yards, and a score on 5 targets. Devin Duvernay, four receptions. Mark Andrews, of course, led the way with 5 receptions and 52 yards. This was the issue this is what I was worried about. This is what I was concerned about for the Baltimore Ravens, is they still did not address wide receiver. The Baltimore Ravens have all of the same problems that the Green Bay Packers do. Who's going to catch the ball? Rashad Bateman's supposed to be your guy, but 2 for 59 for your guy is not going to get it done. They're very lucky that they played the Jets in week 1. That's not an overreaction, because I've been saying this for the entire offseason. If you don't address the wide receiver issues that you have as the Baltimore Ravens, you're going to run into a lot of issues. You're going to struggle offensively once again, especially with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards out. One of the games that I incorrectly picked was I thought the Jags were going to get it done over the Commanders. Obviously they didn't. Trevor Lawrence was 24 of 42 in the 22-28 loss to the Commanders. Morning, Gene. Happy Overreaction Monday to you as well, my friends. Antonio Gibson, didn't expect Antonio Gibson to get it done in the passing game as much. You know, what we know from Carson Wentz from his time in Indianapolis and his time in Philadelphia is he's not a huge check down guy, right? 7 receptions for 72 yards, 14 carries for 58 yards. Antonio Gibson was definitely the workhorse for the Washington Commanders. You know, the Commanders looked pretty dang good for everything that it's worth, you know. Jacksonville still got a lot of rebuilding to do. You know, for what Trevor Lawrence had, if you look at the Jacksonville receiving box score and you say, okay, 6 for $117 for Christian Kirk, 6 for 65 for Zay Jones, 4 for 38 for Marvin Jones. Not terrible numbers. You know, you get 100 yards on the ground between James Robinson and Travis Etienne. Great to see Travis Etienne out there. He only had 4 carries, though. James Robinson was the workhorse and the bell cow with 11 carries for the Jags. But you saw Trevor Lawrence distributing the ball. And he didn't really have that luxury last year. He had Laviska Shenault there, but he was largely underused. You know, Riverboat Ron is definitely a very good coach, Gene. And it's a testament. You know, Ron Rivera is arguably the reason why people are still so high on Cam Newton. Cam Newton hasn't looked good really since he won the MVP. And people are still going, well, we got to start Cam Newton in the league. Cam Newton might be starting in the league for the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, I mean, let's be realistic here. You can't tell me that Cooper Rush is a better quarterback than Cam Newton at any stage of Cam Newton's career. I mean, we saw what Cooper Rush looked like last night after Dak went down. You know, the Dallas offense looked bad, but like we'll get into that as we wind down. I did like what I saw from the Jags. You know, they did have the lead. Of course, they gave it up, but you know, I'm still high on the Jags. You know, Washington was favored by 2.5. Obviously, the Jags didn't cover, but like I still liked what I saw from the Jags, because you have to remember is that they're still rebuilding as well, and they're arguably rebuilding, and they're behind a team like the Detroit Lions in terms of where they are in their rebuild. So I liked what I saw from the Jaguars. I thought that, you know, you start off, if you start off with the loss, you start off with the loss. The Commanders could be a better team than any of us were giving them credit for heading into the season. You know, we knew that their defense was going to be pretty good. You know, Montez Sweat, the whole front, the defensive front for the Washington Commanders is scary. When they're fully healthy, they're very scary. And Carson Wentz is a serviceable quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's a serviceable quarterback. And if you go 27-41 against the Jags, that's kind of what you expect from Carson Wentz. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You don't necessarily expect 4 touchdowns from Carson Wentz, but you know he's going to turn the ball over. It's just it's Carson Wentz. That's what he does. He kind of gets you there, kind of doesn't get you there. Carolina dropped a heartbreaker. Baker Mayfield was hoping for that W, man. 26-24 Cleveland over Carolina. Not a good start if you're Carolina. Nick Chubb got it done with 141 yards on the ground. You know, Kareem Hunt got exactly 50% of the workload with 11 carries for 46. Jacoby Brissett only passed for 147 yards. So they are still very much a run-first team in Cleveland, no matter if it was Baker Mayfield, no matter if it's Jacoby Brissett. I would assume that, you know, in their 12th game, when Deshaun Watson comes back, I assume that they're still going to be a run-first team. Donovan Peoples-Jones led the way, 6 receptions for 60 yards. Amari Cooper only had 3 receptions for 17. And David Njoku, David Njoku got a ridiculous contract. For a tight end that is vastly and largely underused, David Njoku got an insane contract. But he got it. You know, he got paid. He got the bag. Enjoy it, buddy. Christian McCaffrey, 10 carries for 33 yards. I'm not going to, like, I have to kind of, you know, mind my manners when I talk about Christian McCaffrey on this, because Cleveland's got a very good running defense. But 10 carries for 33 yards for a healthy Christian McCaffrey is largely unacceptable if you're a Carolina Panthers fan. And if you're just a football fan in general, you must expect Christian McCaffrey to have more than 33 yards on the ground, man. You have to expect more than 33 yards on the ground for Christian McCaffrey, averaging more than 3.3 yards per game. Who would have thought that Robbie Anderson would have led the way and been five receptions for 102 yards? You know, Robbie Anderson is a deep guy, but he did lead the league in drops last season, so maybe he's finally going to figure it out and turn it on. I think the big take home is the 4 fumbles for Baker Mayfield. 4 fumbles is, bruh. 4 fumbles is terrible. I don't know. I just, yeah, not good. Just, you got to hang on to the ball, young man, especially when you were playing against the Cleveland Browns, your old team, which we all know how you guys each feel about each other. We know how the franchise feels about you. We know how you feel about the franchise, no matter what you tell us. You gotta do better, Baker. 26-24, Cleveland got it done. Carolina's sitting defeated, tied with the Atlanta Falcons at the bottom of the NFC South. The last of the early afternoon games, Indianapolis and Houston, ended in a 20-20 tie. That sucks if you're for both teams. You know, that's if you're the Jags, that's not terrible. Not terrible. Obviously, we'll talk about the Giants and the Titans next. But if you're the Jags, that's not terrible. You know, a tie is not as bad as a loss, but obviously it's not as good as a win either. Jonathan Taylor, $161 on the ground. Look, I'm very much a believer, and I know that he's 4 games in a row over 140 rushing yards against the Houston Texans. But I'm still a strong believer that Jonathan Taylor is the best running back in the NFL. He picked up exactly where he left off last season. So for anybody that ever had any sort of doubt, anybody that had any sort of questions of like, hey, where exactly are we going to pick up with Jonathan Taylor? Exactly where he left off. Gashing teams. Davis Mills, 240 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Davis Mills, the guy that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should have drafted instead of Kyle Trask, arguably. 7 receptions for 82 yards for Brandon Cooks. Had a long of 42, so that's obviously where the vast majority of that came. But, you know, Davis Mills looked all right. When you compare him to Matt Ryan, he had a higher passer rating than Matt Ryan, although Matt Ryan had 352 passing yards. He had 50 dropbacks. You know, we're getting all of these ancient guys. Matt Ryan is old as dirt, 50 dropbacks. Joe Flacco's older than Matt Ryan, 59 dropbacks. Like, we're having these old guys pass the ball a lot. You know, but to be fair, there were 88 offensive plays called by the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor still had 31 carries. 31 carries. So, I mean, they still had, you know, they were still very, very balanced in terms of what we saw. 31 carries, 32 completions. Not terrible. Michael Pittman Jr. got it done. 9 receptions for $121 and a score. Matt Ryan again with 4 fumbles, though. So, yeah, Baker Mayfield with 4 fumbles. Matt Ryan with 4 fumbles. Like, quarterbacks got to start holding on to the ball. He lost one of those fumbles. If you don't lose one of those fumbles, you're arguably talking about an Indianapolis Colts team that is 1-0 versus 0-1. You know, you can't have that. You can't have that, especially for a veteran quarterback like Matt Ryan. But I do think that Matt Ryan is trying to do too much. And I say that because not because he was slighted in Atlanta, but he's trying to come out and prove himself again. He's got a new fan base. He's got a new organization. He's got new teammates. He really wants to come out and prove himself. You know, we've heard reports of that Matt Ryan hasn't been very nice. That he's hard to deal with and get acclimated with. Maybe. I mean, you know, only the guys that are in the locker room know that. You know, there could be hearsay, there could be rumors and murmurs, and, you know, we'll talk about that when we get into the Bucs game about just making stuff up to get likes and get people to comment on your stuff. But, you know, maybe Matt Ryan is, maybe Matt Ryan's not. We don't know. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know until you know, right? First of the late afternoon games, 4:25 kickoff. The Giants with the upset, 21-20 over the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry was held in check. Who would have thought going in? Because a lot of people are really not that high on Saquon Barkley. Who would have thought that Saquon Barkley would literally double Derrick Henry in rushing? Saquon Barkley only had 18 carries. Derrick Henry had 21 carries, 21 for 82 for Derrick Henry, 18 of 164 for Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones, Look, Daniel Jones only passed the ball 20. He only had 21 dropbacks, but he completed 17 of those passes. I guess 18 if you count the interception. So if you 17 of 21 is still pretty dang good. Ryan Tannehill was 20 of 33 for a $166. But this is, the Tennessee has no wide receivers really either. Kyle Phillips led the team, 6 receptions for 66 yards. If you're not a Tennessee Titans fan, tell me how much you know about Kyle Phillips. Tell me how much you know about Dontrell Hilliard. And we know about Treylon Burks. But you've got all of these. You've got issues. Saquon Barkley led the team with 6 receptions for the Giants. Saquon Barkley is known to be a do-it-all guy, and then they're known to have other wide receivers. The problem for the Giants, everybody's always injured. Kenny Golladay caught 2 of 2 targets, only 22 yards, though. Sterling Shepard caught 2 of 4 for 71 yards. But how long is it going to be until Sterling Shepard goes down? Sterling Shepard is going to be injured. It happens literally every year. What I find crazy is that Kadarius Toney didn't register a single catch. That, to me, that's the interesting part, is Kadarius Toney not getting involved in the offense really outside of 2 carries for 23 yards. There was really it was a no-show for Kadarius Toney, very much like Allen Robinson was a no-show. If you're a wide receiver, you're at the mercy of your quarterback getting you the ball. And if your quarterback can't get you the ball, then you can't catch. You can't even attempt to get a catch. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed if you're Brian Daboll. I know we saw the video of Brian Daboll celebrating at the end, which was awesome to see, in the locker room with the guys. And look, 21-20 over the Titans. When the Titans were favored by 5.5, the Titans were the number 1 team in the AFC. I mean, it's impressive. It really is. You've got to be feeling good about yourself if you're the Giants getting a win, whether it's a 1-point win or not. You got the 2-point conversion at the end of the game. Perfect. That's exactly what you want. That's how you want to start your season. If you're the New York Giants, you want to start not in a hole. The Giants are famous for starting in a hole. Maybe new coach, maybe changes the feeling and the vibes of the team. Minnesota 23-7 over the Green Bay Packers. I told you. Aaron Rodgers passed for what? 195 yards. Let me say that one more time. Aaron Rodgers passed the ball for 195 yards. No touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked 4 times. I told you it was going to happen. Green Bay has no answers. How about A.J. Dillon with 5 receptions for 46 yards to lead the team? 5 receptions on 6 targets. Romeo Doubs, 4 receptions. And this is who they're arguably talking about is going to emerge as the wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers is the rookie Romeo Doubs. Maybe he will. Sammy Watkins, nobody's worried about Sammy Watkins. It's good to see Robert Tonyan come back out of there after his ACL injury. But Minnesota's got a good defense. You knew that Minnesota was going to have a good defense this year coming in. Everybody knew that. Kirk Cousins, 23 of 32 for 277 and 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook, 20 carries for 90 yards. Alexander Mattison, decent compliment, 8 carries for 36 yards. They both finished with a 4.5 average. Justin Jefferson did exactly what Justin Jefferson is going to do whenever he wants to do it. 9 receptions, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. You can't stop. Justin Jefferson is one of those receivers that you can't stop. You can only hope to contain. That was Antonio Brown in his prime when they had the triple Bs in Pittsburgh with Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger, and of course, AB himself. You can only hope to contain some of these guys, and Justin Jefferson is a guy that you hope that you can contain. There was a reason why Green Bay was only favored by 1.5 heading into this game. There's a reason for that. And I'm telling you right now, this is Aaron Rodgers can do, he can come out on the radio and do his RELAX thing again and try to get the crowd to relax. But the fact of the matter is you lost the number one wide receiver in the NFL, and you replaced him with nobody. You replaced him with who? You didn't replace him with anybody. Aaron Rodgers took all of your money. Aaron Rodgers handicapped that team. He didn't. You know what? Aaron Rodgers signed the contract that you offered him. Green Bay handicapped themselves. Green Bay should have traded Aaron Rodgers to Carolina like it was rumored. You should have made some sort of move. I find it very hard to believe that both Aaron Rodgers and everybody in the franchise had no idea that Davante Adams was actually going to leave. Davante Adams was very vocal in the offseason that he wanted to leave. Aaron Rodgers was rumored to leave. Davante Adams was rumored to leave. Obviously, one of them left. 44-21 Kansas City Chiefs over the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals have the same issues that the Packers have. There's no wide receiver one. You can't count on AJ Green to be your wide receiver one, just like you can't count on Randall Cobb to be your wide receiver one. Sure, I know DeAndre Hopkins is on the Cardinals, but he's gone for 6 games. He's not coming back until their 7th game. So you can't be concerned with what you're going to see with DeAndre Hopkins for 7 more weeks. If you can't pass the ball, you're going to struggle if you're the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray leading the team in rushing yards with 29 is atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Patrick Mahomes completed 30 of 39 passes for 360 yards and 5 touchdowns. If you've got no answers on defense, look, the Cardinals as of right now, and obviously I say as of right now because we haven't seen the Seahawks. Knowing what we're expecting the Seahawks to look like, the Cardinals might be shockingly the worst team in the NFC West. Because we expect the Seahawks to be bad. We didn't expect the Cardinals to look this bad. And the Cardinals looked really, really, really freaking bad. James Conner, 10 carries for 26 yards. Like, guys, what are you doing? Just absolutely terrible. Got to figure that out if you're the Cardinals. Just completely unacceptable. Raiders couldn't get it done in Los Angeles against the Chargers. They dropped it 24-19. And, largely in part was Derek Carr with his 3 interceptions. Justin Herbert, 26 of 34 for 279 and 3 scores. Again, they couldn't get it done on the ground, but we knew that the Raiders were going to have a very solid defense. That's exactly what we knew. We knew that the Raiders were going to have a solid defense. And it showed when they were able to stop the ball. Justin Herbert got his numbers because he distributed the ball very well. Keenan Allen, 4 receptions. Gerald Everett, DeAndre Carter, Trey McKitty, all 3 receptions. Austin Eckler had 4. Mike Williams, Joshua Kelly, Xander Hovarth, 3. Like, he just distributed the ball very, very well. Davante Adams was force-fed. You kind of like when you've got a guy like Davante Adams, I guess you expect it to be force-fed. 10 receptions and 17 targets for 141 yards. That's what you expect from Davante Adams. What I didn't expect was Hunter Renfrow to be completely irrelevant. 3 receptions on 6 targets for 21 yards with a long of 9. I really expected Hunter Renfrow, because you have to remember, he was the most sure-handed wide receiver in the NFL last season. He was top 5 in receptions, and he was number 1 in catch percentage. Those are fantastic complementary statistics. If you're going to be top 5 in receptions and you're going to be the highest catch percentage wide receiver, that's it. Sign me up. That's what you need. That's the perfect compliment if you're a wide receiver, is to be able to say, hey, yeah, I'll catch the ball basically every single time you throw it to me. Of course, Sunday Night Football, we wrapped up. Tampa Bay got it done 19-3. The defense shined. The defense definitely shined for the Buccaneers. Tom Brady talked about what it was like to have Chris Godwin back for week 1.
I think anytime we get Chris the ball, it's a good thing. He's an amazing player, and keep finding ways to get him the ball. Be a great thing for offense.
Chris Godwin was back, of course. Unfortunately, he went down with a hamstring, and he never returned. But the thing that you want to hear is, you want this. You don't want this, but I would rather Chris Godwin tweak a hamstring than have injured the knee. The knee looked absolutely fine. Chris Godwin was explosive. He looked quick. His cuts were quick. His route running was quick. 3 receptions for 35 yards, 11.7 average. Not a bad day at the office for Chris Godwin before he got injured. 3 of 3, by the way. Caught all 3 of his targets. A hamstring tweak is not something that is uncommon when coming back from an ACL or any type of knee injury, because you're overprotecting your knee. That's just the basic human reaction, which leads me to ask the question is, should they have prepped Godwin better? I'm not a medical expert. I'm just a guy, but I do know that you're going to have a hamstring issue if you don't prep properly. And was he not prepped properly? You could plan for a hamstring injury. You could plan for a hamstring pull. It's very common. It's common knowledge. You can go to WebMD and look it up. And I'm not blaming the medical staff. Everybody knows that the medical staff got a lot of flack in preseason and in training camp for all of the injuries. ACL tears and things like you can't prep for an ACL tear, but you can prep for a soft tissue injury. And that's exactly what we saw with Chris Godwin. Glad that it's only a hamstring. However, we saw, with Julio Jones last season, hamstrings can linger. Julio Jones played for the least amount of games in his entire career last season with the Tennessee Titans because of a hamstring. We saw AJ Brown miss a lot of last season for the Tennessee Titans with a hamstring. So it's just you've got to make sure that you're prepping these guys, man. Stretch them out. We've got stretch zones on every street corner in Tampa. It's almost like Walgreens and Publix down here, where they're available everywhere. So find them, take them to one, have them push that leg back, stretch those hamstrings out, and get back on the field. It's not going to be pretty. Donovan Smith left with an elbow injury. That's the one that scares me. That scares me the most is Donovan Smith, because there's no depth. There's no depth on the offensive line. Josh Wells came in, and Josh Wells looked exactly the same as he did last season. He came in, he looked really, really bad for the first, few plays, and then he settled in, and then he started looking decent. What happens if Josh Wells gets in? Obviously, there's no prognosis officially yet on Donovan Smith's elbow, but you got to have bodies first and foremost, whether they're able to perform at a high level. Josh Wells is better than nobody, right? You have to have bodies. And you have all of this cap space now. You restructured Shaq Mason's contract. You freed up $6 million. I still think you need to restructure Donovan Smith somehow. There could be something going on internally. As as Primetime Pelly has been telling me, he thinks that there's something going on internally, which is why Donovan Smith's contract has not been restructured. And that's entirely possible. It's absolutely entirely possible, but you've got a lot of free money, whether it's for the Rob Gronkowski rumors. I'm not buying any of the Rob Gronkowski rumors. If he comes back, great. But, I'm over it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm over it at this point. If he comes back, he comes back. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'm not cheering for one way or the other. It's kind of like the Deshaun Watson situation. I'm done with it. Julio Jones, fun fact for us before the game started, as Ian Rappaport let us know, Julio Jones was clocked as the fastest wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during training camp. Old man, oft injury-prone Julio Jones was the fastest wide receiver clocked at training camp for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he looked very fast last night as well. He almost looked like his old self. And I say almost because we saw a couple, that slant route that he ran. Julio Jones of old would have caught that. Fingertips or not, Julio Jones of old would have caught that, but unfortunately he didn't catch it. But it was good to see Julio Jones get involved. 3 receptions for 69 yards on 5 targets. Of course, Mike Evans led the way, 5 for 71 with a touchdown on 7 targets. This is what we want to expect to see. And it's going to be a little bit different. Russell Gage is still coming off of a hamstring issue himself. He caught 2 of 2 for 13 yards. So you're utilizing Russell Gage. You're kind of slowly implementing him back in. Now you're going to have to kind of slowly implement Chris Godwin back in, because I'll tell you what, if you didn't know that Chris Godwin was coming off of an ACL and MCL surgery, you would have had no idea. You would have had no idea that he is coming off of those surgeries the way that he played before he went down with the hamstring. Chris Godwin looked like prime mid-season formed Chris Godwin in week 1 when he shouldn't have been. Realistically, the timeline was week 3-4 is, the medical timeline. We heard, okay, well, yeah, there's murmurs. There's murmurs at practice that Chris Godwin is not going to play. The murmurs are between people like you and me. Yeah, I've heard that Chris Godwin's gonna, he's gonna miss the first 4 weeks. There you go. And now we start a rumor. Now we have clickbait. Like that's all that is. That's all that is. Chris Godwin was expected to play, and the Bucs were hopeful that Chris Godwin was going to play in week 1 for a long time. But the actual injury prognosis was week 3, 4, possibly even week 5, because that is the actual timeline for rehabilitation and recovery from ACL and MCL surgery. Tom Brady had a couple of bad throws. Obviously, we know Tom Brady's always very hard on himself, which is good. I mean, you want that. But what I noticed is he had a lot of zip on the ball. I mean, I felt like I was watching Brett Favre throw some of those balls where, I felt bad for wide receivers trying to catch those passes. And it looked like he had a lot more snap in his throws than he usually does. I don't want to say passing with urgency, but they showed us the trajectory during the game last night. That it's exactly the same. The whole formation, the whole rotation, everything is identical, and it has been for his entire career. But I feel like there's just like a lot more pop last night to how he was getting the ball out. The defense absolutely dominated. Of course, Devin White got 2 sacks. And Coach Todd Bowles talked about Devin White's performance last night.
It wasn't just the pass rush. It was the way he executed and ran the defense. He was kind of the quarterback out there, understanding formations and getting us in the right calls and checks. And we give him a little more freedom this year to do some of the things that help us get better. And I thought he did a great job tonight.
So Devin White is the leader of this team. Like, he is the vocal leader. He is the energetic leader. He led the team. He had 8 total tackles, 7 solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. I mean, we know how good Antoine Winfield is. I think Chris Collinsworth said that Antoine Winfield is the best football player in the secondary in the NFL, or one of the best pure football players in the NFL, which is a fantastic compliment. But when you've got Levante David stepping it up, Levante David, it was nice to see Levante David play because we knew how hard he worked in the offseason to overcome that foot injury, right? Like, Levante David told us specifically, I didn't take a vacation. I didn't take time off. I rehabbed my injury every single day. Every day I was rehabbing my foot because I want to come back. I want to come back strong, and I want to come back in a big way. And he did. Boy, did he. So, like, guys, the defense isn't necessarily a question. I know the Cowboys struggled, but if you can hold the Dallas Cowboys to 244 total yards and win 19-3, I think that you can't just take that win with a grain of salt, because it was the offense that didn't look that great. Outside of Leonard Fournette with 127 yards, Tom Brady completed 18 of 27 for 212. He had 1 touchdown and 1 pick. Not a great night for Tom Brady. We thought that we thought that, knowing what we know about how the preseason played out, we assumed that the Bucs were going to struggle to run the ball because all of their offensive line graded much higher at pass blocking than run blocking. But Leonard Fournette, 21 carries for 127 yards. I mean, that's very promising because the Cowboys have a very good run defense, and they got it done on the ground. Leonard Fournette said last night, this team is stacked. This is Tom Brady's never played with a team this stacked before, and he's not wrong. Sure, he's had Randy Moss, he had Wes Welker, but he's never had a team this stacked with weapons. Leonard Fournette is showing why they re-signed him for 3 years. If Leonard Fournette comes out in week 2 and goes over the century mark again, I mean, he's earning that paycheck right off the bat. Rachaad White on his first carry last night, I'm not sure what he was doing. He did a lot of dancing in the backfield. He finished 6 carries for 14 yards. Obviously, you didn't need Leonard Fournette in at the end of the game because it was out of hand at that point. But Leonard Fournette in the top 5 for rushing. You have Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, and Leonard Fournette as your top 5 rushers. Obviously before this week ends. Will Javonte Williams get over that? I don't really know. But it's got to be a promising win for the Cowboys. A, it's an NFC win. B, it's over the Cowboys. And I know we like to rag on the Cowboys fans, but the Cowboys are always a team that you have to give some level of respect to. Very unfortunate situation with Dak Prescott going to be gone now for 6 to 8 weeks. That's not what you want. I'm telling you, Dallas is going to have to call somebody. Just like we're going to have to call somebody with the Buccaneers, man. We're going to have to call somebody and figure this out with the offensive line because they're struggling. If Donovan Smith misses much time, let's hope for the best. Let's hope that he's back for week 2. But if Donovan Smith misses a game or 2, they're gonna have to figure something else out because you can't expect Josh Wells and nobody else. You're now looking at Nick Leverett having to play three positions potentially. Robert Hainsey got 0 snaps off, and usually your center doesn't. But most of their offensive line played 100% of the snaps. What happens if somebody goes down? There's not really anybody else that's there. You can't expect Nick Leverett to be a Swiss Army knife and run 3 straight and fill in at 3 positions. he's never going to excel and exceed in his career and develop properly because he's going to have to focus on learning all of these different positions. So we'll just have to see. We're going to have to see. It's going to be, if the Bucs can get through this gauntlet, they've got New Orleans looked really bad anyway. So, divisional matchups are always tough. And you saw it with New Orleans and Atlanta, 27-26. Divisional matchups are always tough. The Bucs have not had an answer for New Orleans. Maybe week 2 is the first of those 2 answers. I've got them splitting the season series with the Saints. I would prefer a 2-0 start versus a 1-1 start for the Buccaneers. Because you don't want the Saints to start out 2-0. You really don't. Saints fans are so annoying. You don't want to hear them. But anyway, that's going to do it for us today on this Monday, Overreaction Monday edition of Channelside in the Morning. Make sure you follow us on all of the social media platforms. Just search for the Channelside Sports Network. We're going to do this all over again tomorrow.